Hey guys, welcome back to another best abilities video. Last episode we talked about the best in mid lane, and for today we're gonna head on over to the role that's been useless since 2017, AD carry. Or now it's called bot lane since mages can be viably played bot now, but we're gonna just stick to the good old fashioned marksman. By the way, before you go into the comments talking about how Aphelios doesn't have an E, well guess what? There are over 150 champions besides him, so there would still be over 150 E's in the game. But anyways, if you haven't watched my previous best abilities episode, let me quickly talk about the rules I set for choosing which ability. Since League of Legends has no shortage of different scenarios, obviously there will be situations where one ability is better than another. For example, in some instances you would want Yasuo's Wind Wall if you're up against a high projectile enemy team, but if they're all melees it would be a dead ability. Also, I'll be looking at the abilities based on usage in a vacuum, as in if you were to take them out of the original champion. Darius' ultimate is among the most terrifying in the game, but without the passive bleed and bonus attack damage, you're not going to be doing jack. Lastly, I'm only going to be looking at champions whose primary role is bot lane, which pretty much rules out every mage like Seraphine and Swing. So again, we'll only be looking at marksmen for the sake of compartmentalization, but with that out of the way, let's begin our Build-A-Bear session and make the most busted AD carry I can make. Choosing the best passive out of all the AD carries was tough, as for just about all of them, their playstyle is centered around it, especially the newer ones. For example, Aphelios' passive literally gives him 5 different weapons. I tried to look for the most beneficial one in a general sense, since whichever one you pick depends on what kind of playstyle you're going for. But I think you can't really go wrong with Jin's Whisper. Now this will take a bit of time to explain, so hear me out. Jin's extremely high damage is offset by his slow auto attack speed and 4-round magazine. About that, what kind of gun has a mag with only 4 rounds? But if we overlook that, you might be immediately asking me why would I pick Jin's passive because it's so slow. Believe it or not, Jin's slow attack speed is actually not tied to his passive, it's just an innate property of the champion. Nowhere in Whisper's description does it say Jin's attack speed cannot improve through items or stats, only growth. That's just part of his character's base stats, not the actual ability. While you'll still have to deal with the 4 rounds, you now get to attach this to a champion who actually scales off of attack speed, which allows you to get 4 really hard hitting attacks in just a couple of seconds, turning you into pretty much a burst AD carry with a free execute every 4 hits. The cherry on top is that you also receive 2 of the most incredible stat boosters anyone could ever have. Every Moment Matters allows you to reach Jin's ridiculous attack stat of 600 to 1000 in the late game while still being able to hit super fast, and if that wasn't good enough, you also get the huge movement speed boost from critical strikes. What makes this passive balanced was that Jin himself just couldn't shoot very fast. But if you remove the attack speed limiter, it actually just might be the strongest passive in the entire game, because imagine having something like 800 AD, 2.0 attack speed, and get something like 70% movement speed buff every time you critically strike, and your crit strikes do full damage since Jin's crit damage reduction is also tied to his own champion. You'd be uncatchable and 2-shot everyone around the map. Honorable mentions go to Senna's Absolution, Lucian's Light Slinger, and Ashe's Frost Shot. Like Jin, Senna's reduced crit damage and slow attack speed is exclusive only to her, meaning you can make way more efficient use of Absolution since you can attack faster. You also get free bonus AD, crit, and attack range as well as lifesteal once you cross over 100 crit rate. And it also gives you a permanent 20% bonus damage to your basic attacks and a burst of movement speed. This was also in contention for the best passive in the game since it gives you a metric ton of stats, but after thinking about it for a bit, Jin's is slightly better since his stat bonuses to AD and movement speed are stronger and way easier to stack up. But you really can't go wrong with either one, it all just comes down to personal preference. Lightslinger doesn't do you any favors when it comes to getting free stats, but being able to attack twice after casting an ability can be absolutely broken if paired with the right skills since it's sort of like Master Yi's Double Strike. Lucian makes good use of this passive on its own, but if we were to slap a low cooldown ability like Vayne's Tumble, it has a 2-second cooldown, which is even shorter than Lucian's own dash, allowing you to spam many more double shots. If you combine this with perhaps Vayne's Silver Bolts, you'll be able to get so many procs in a short time since you can auto then Q and get 2 more hits right away. Aside from that though, it's more of a gimmicky passive and only works on a select arrangement of abilities, but it's useful for both crit builds and on hit. Ashe's Frost Shot lowers your crit damage a little bit, but in exchange your auto attacks permanently have a built-in 2-second 20 to 30% slow debuff that doubles to 40 to 60% with crit strikes. Ashe already does a great job kiting bruisers into oblivion, but she struggles to keep them off of her once they do get in actual range. This can be easily exploited on a champion with higher mobility, as they can essentially permakite anyone who doesn't have face rush or a million dashes to catch up to you. More of a utility benefit than anything, but it's still a very powerful one. Before we continue, I already know some of you might ask why not Callista's passive, and it's mostly because all the downsides to her are attached to the passive itself, not her own basic attacks the way there are for Jhin and Senna. But moving on to Q. Despite being a basic attack-oriented role, the Marksman subclass has quite an interesting arrangement of Qs. Since the laning phase is so important to the bot lane, the best all-purpose choice would have to go to Kai'Sa's Icathian Rain, on account of its versatility. You will not get the upgraded version since you don't have Kai'Sa's passive, but even at base it's still pretty solid. An affordable mana cost, very quick cast time, can wave clear well against low health minions, low cooldown, auto targets, and scales off of bonus AD, which you'll be getting a ton of from Jhin or Senna's passive. Most AD carries have their main damaging tool on their Q, so I decided to look for the best one for general purposes. It sucks that you're missing the upgrade, which does a heck of a lot more damage, but all the bonus attack damage you get should more than make up for the loss in damage, since chances are you'll have 2 to 3 times more AD than what Kai'Sa usually builds. Honorable mentions go to Vayne's Tumble, Jinx's Switcheroo, and Twitch's Ambush. Tumble, I already mentioned before, is a low-cost, low-cooldown dash that lets your next attack essentially critically strike. It's a very simple ability but very effective since it allows you to quickly reposition in a fight to either get closer to enemies or put some distance between the two of you. And if you combine this with either Lucian's passive or Ashe's passive, you can get a lot of mileage out of one simple ability, since the former essentially turns your next basic attack to do bonus damage and strike again, while the latter makes you the most hated ranged champion in the game by the entire population of top laners. Switcheroo is pretty cool. In minigun form, you get 130% bonus attack speed for free at max level, which is already an amazing steroid on its own. And if you switch to Fishbones, your auto attacks deal splash damage and can shoot from a mile away. Pair this up with Jhin's passive and you'll be doing 1500 AoE damage autos at 750 attack range, making you the greatest hyper carry to ever exist, period. However, it doesn't really do all too much in the early game since you still have to survive until level 9 to get the full effect, which is why I selected Kai'Sa's Q since it offers a bit more benefit at all stages of the game. If you want to become an assassin AD carry, look no further than Ambush. You can go invisible, walk up to someone, and then appear with a huge amount of bonus attack speed and get 4 shots off really quickly. I actually would have chosen this as the best Q in the game because you can do so much dumb cheese with this ability, which is fitting because it's Twitch's passive, but apparently it only resets if someone dies while poisoned by his passive, so you can't use this to assassinate and then go back to stealth to reload and do it again because you do need deadly venom. Otherwise, it would have been pretty fun to play with. You knew this was coming, there was no way I couldn't choose this for the best W for AD carries. Yes, it is technically situational because it only applies to projectiles, and yes, it did recently get nerfed, but Samira's Blade Whirl takes the W spot for the bot lane. Unlike Yasuo's Wind Wall, this covers 360 degrees around her, allowing you to completely extinguish any ranged attacks that might come your way. Ashe Arrow, Seraphine Ult, Veigar Ultimate, Blitzcrank Hook, Morgana Bind, Lux Root, there are so many things you can block with this ability, and it can buy you a little bit of time if you're using it while reloading. The main reason I was intent on Blade Whirl even after the nerfs is just because for the most part all other Ws are somewhat underwhelming in comparison, but then again that's just me. Honorable mentions go to Ashe's Volley, Sivir's Ricochet, and Tristana's Rocket Jump. Volley goes without saying, very wide range poke that'll sting like a mother because 100% AD scaling with Jhin or Senna passive means every 4 seconds you'll be throwing out 11 shots that can potentially deal up to 800 plus damage each. You can essentially kill any squishy target in the late game with 3 volleys and you don't even have to get that close. That being said, you don't get the slow debuff which makes it not as abusable for kiting, and it does have a very high mana cost, so it essentially forces you to buy a mana supplement, which isn't the main point of this champion's kit since we're going for a 1000 AD one-shot clickbait AD carry. Ricochet was chosen for a similar reason to Volley in that the bouncing damage will hurt like hell with all the free attack damage you'll be getting, and it can aid in increasing your teamfight presence to make up for your limited ammo supply per hit. Basically, it allows you to still keep up your damage uptime since 3 out of every 4 hits will do splash damage. That being said, the bonus attack speed buff you get is tied to Sivir's ultimate, which hampers its maximum potential on anyone outside of her. Tristana is the only AD carry with her mobility being on her W rather than E, which is how most of the other marksmen are. It's one of the longest free targeted dash ranges in the game at 900, and while it has a quarter-second cast time, that actually can work to your advantage since you can use it to avoid hooks like Blitzcrank or Nautilus, making it super useful for escaping certain crown control. That and the reset component upon takedowns can let you bounce all over the place. But the reason I didn't choose this as the top spot is mostly because Blade Whirl is, in my opinion, a better defensive option, especially when we look at the ability I chose for E. I might be overestimating mobility on a marksman, but in fairness, you really can't go wrong with a dash or blink no matter what champion you're playing. So I elected to go with Ezreal's Arcane Shift. Basically, it's a second flash that also deals damage. It may have a high mana cost and cooldown which you cannot shorten because you don't have Mystic Shot, but it shares the same property with Rocket Jump of having a cast time that can actually work for you, and because it's a blink, it's a lot better for mobility because you can shift past Veigar's Cage, Poppy's Aura, things like that. AD carries usually have their E as either a dash or utility spell, and I opted for mobility since we have our utility from W. Honorable mentions go to Vayne's Condemn and Sivir's Spell Shield. Condemn is a very annoying ability to deal with since it knocks targets back a considerable distance, and essentially makes it so fighting Vayne with your back literally against the wall is a death sentence. Depending on whether or not you want hard crowd control or a dash for self-peel, Condemn and Arcane Shift are interchangeable, although I personally would choose the latter. I did say in why no one plays Sivir that Spell Shield is an underwhelming ability because practically speaking, it does nothing better than a regular item Spell Shield such as Banshee's Veil or Edge of Night. But that's mostly because all of her other abilities are also kind of underwhelming. For this champion, having a Spell Shield that gives you mana isn't all too bad since it can make you virtually uncatchable. Blade Whirl can be used to block projectiles and Spell Shield can be used to block melee attacks. But again, we already have a defensive ability, so having two might be a bit redundant. So prior to making the actual script, I had Jake, my thumbnail artist, make the thumbnail ahead of time, but I realized later that Kai'Sa's ultimate is completely useless on anyone because they can't apply plasma stacks. I'm not entirely sure what to do here. Yes, I understand when Sylas steals this ultimate, he can still use it to dash to someone despite not having Kai'Sa's passive, but he has his own unique interactions with ultimates, whereas our champion probably won't. For the sake of this video, I think I might actually have to break my own rules here. So feel free to roast me in the comments, but Killer Instinct is an amazing ultimate because it's an instant reposition tool, a long range dash, and a shield all in one. Not to mention the shield strength scales with 200% total attack damage at rank 3, which means you could be pulling up a 2000 HP shield towards the late game, making you virtually indestructible for a couple of seconds. I know we already have Arcane Shift, but having two mobility tools plus Blade Whirl will make you the most annoying ADC in the game to deal with. Your Q and auto attacks will be doing all the damage you need, so for the most part, I opted for utility over more damage to cover your ass in case you get engaged on by like a Zed or a Malphite. Honorable mentions go to Ashe's Enchanted Crystal Arrow, Vars' Chain of Corruption, and Xayah's Featherstorm. Having a global ultimate that can stun a target for an absurdly long time is what makes Ashe such a threat to deal with, as she can start fights from literally halfway across the map, or you can use it at close range to stop pursuers in their tracks. Out of all the global ults, this would be the best in my opinion since Jinx, Draven, and Ezreal mostly only serve to do damage, which you will be already doing more than enough of. Chain of Corruption has that same pick potential, but it trades the infinite range for potential AoE lockdown since it forces anyone near the initially struck target to get away from the circle as fast as possible lest they be rooted too. It's a great ultimate for picking off a mispositioned ability or for divide and conquering, and since it's hard crowd control you can use it offensively or defensively. You will not have the ability to sling the feathers back once you throw them out, but the main reason Xayah is such a difficult target to lock down is because she can go untargetable for a second and a half, and that allows you to completely ignore any incoming dangers such as Malphite ultimate, Zed ultimate, things like that. Untargetability is one of the most valuable defensive tools in the game because you can dodge practically any ability that isn't a tether, and Xayah is the only AD carry who can do this. So let's put everything together. We have Jin's passive, Kai'Sa's Q, Samira's W, Ezreal's E, and Kai'Sa's ultimate. Considering I put two abilities from the same champion, that says a lot about how strong Kai'Sa is. Honestly, I would have taken Samira's Wild Rush in place of Ezreal's E since it can reset on takedown, but it did get nerfed to be much slower and only target hostile enemies, so now you can't slide through your allies like you used to be able to. But what do you guys think? Once again, let me know your own list of abilities in the comment section below if you agree or disagree with my choices, or if you think there's a better selection of abilities, please let me know about that as well. Again, I do apologize for breaking my own rule with the ultimate because I planned out the abilities ahead of time just off the top of my head and I completely forgot the plasma stacks aren't a property of the ultimate by itself. I will be sure to double check for when the support video comes out though, I promise. That's it for today though. If you enjoyed, a rating would be much appreciated, and if you'd like to support my channel, please leave a comment and consider subscribing. Also, take a look at my other best abilities videos. There should be a playlist popping up at the end of the video, as well as a link in the description, along with my Discord server and social medias. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for the next video. Take care.